2020 has been a crazy year. What's even more crazy is that it's not even over yet. In fact, the craziest part may still be to come, since we're facing what promises to be a hotly contested election come November. With everything that's going on, getting reliable information is more important than ever. But with trust in the media falling to a new low, how do we get reliable information? And why is trust in the media so low to begin with? We'll get into all of that and more. I'm Ben Leach, and this is The Ben Leach Show. Before we get into today's video, I'd like to thank today's video sponsor, you. After all, this show is for you, and honestly, if I kept saying me all of the time, I think that the joke would get old and you would think that I'm just a plain narcissist. So to fix that, I'm going to choose my favorite comment from my previous video, and whoever I select will become my new video sponsor for my next video. So now that that's taken care of, let's get into the video. How did we get to where we are right now? To a point to where so many people seem to be distrustful of what they see and hear? Well, here at the Ben Leach Show, we like to stick to the facts. So in order to get you a good answer, we're going to have to go back in time. I'm talking way back. Before Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, before social media as a whole, including MySpace. Back before smartphones, the internet, and even cell phones writ large. Now I know what you're thinking. Did that time really ever exist? The answer is yes. I think they called it the Dark Ages or something like that. Anyway, back then, if you wanted to get the news, you were probably tuning into the radio. Or if you had a TV, you would be watching CBS Nightly News with Walter Cronkite, the most trusted name in America. If you didn't hear a news story there, chances are you probably wouldn't hear it at all. And people generally liked it that way. I mean, you can look at the poll to see that the trust in media was at an all-time high during this period of history. But that changed. What exactly changed? Well, in 1980 was the advent of the 24-hour news network, known as CNN. And what an invention that was. Someone could tune in at any time and get some news story. Now the real question is, was there really ever enough news to fill a complete 24-hour news cycle? The answer back then is the same as today, no. But what changed? Well, what's changed is that there are even more 24-hour news networks, such as MSNBC, Fox, and others. So if they don't have enough news to fill a full 24-hour cycle, how do they do it? Well, they start by inflating a headline, making it bigger than it actually is. That really sells. That's their whole purpose. They're competing over the same amount of views, and they have a limited amount of news stories to choose from the day. So if they can get you to believe that the sky is constantly falling, they're going to keep up viewership. The issue is that once you start down that road, you either have to double down and come up with increasingly outlandish stories, or you have to get out of the game entirely. And with our capitalist system, that's never going to happen. But the issue is that if you keep telling people that the sky is falling, eventually, someday, they're going to look out their window and see that the sky isn't falling. That this is really hyped up nonsense. And with the political divide in our country only getting bigger, this really exacerbates that problem. That these news sources are taking a side and really also taking part in the division. In fact, according to a Gallup poll, 8 in 10 Americans believe that the media is largely responsible for the current political divide that we have. And a majority of those respondents also believe that each news media source has an implicit bias. People were even willing to recognize that their go-to news source was bias. So what's the answer then? If it's gotten so deep into all of our media, how are we supposed to get reliable information? That's a good question. Honestly, it's hard to answer, because with the advent of the internet, things have gotten even worse. I mean, anyone with a phone now can say anything they want to, and it doesn't have to be true or accurate. No doubt you've heard the term fake news. That term wasn't coined by President Donald Trump, but it certainly has been very popularized by him. And that just refers to the fact that people can say whatever they want with no repercussions, and so much information is being bombarded into social media platforms that it's almost impossible to sift through every single one of those news clippings or articles or self-reported things to see what's true and what's not. I mean, social media had unintended consequences, as with anything in life. I mean, it's brought us closer together communication-wise, and that's amazing. But it's also left us very vulnerable to large swaths of misinformation being pushed, and if it trends, then people start to believe it all of a sudden. They repeat these certain articles that just don't have any factual basis. So how do we get reliable information? The answer is you really can't get the full story from just one source. You're going to have to do a couple of things to make sure that you're insulated from really getting led astray. So follow these simple steps. Step 1 is to recognize that anything that you see or hear is going to come from a person that has a bias. Now, you may think that that comes without saying, but it really helps to reinforce that no one can be completely objective. I don't claim to be completely objective. In fact, I discussed that in my very first video, that I'm not objective. So going into what you're seeing or hearing with an open mind, knowing that what you're hearing is going to come from an imperfect person, helps you to really listen fully, and give your full attention to what they're saying and pick out the facts and pick out their opinion. It'll help you separate the two. Step number 2 is to read broadly. I wouldn't recommend sticking to just one source to get your news. Also, wouldn't recommend that you stick to one side of the political aisle to get your news either. If you just stick to one site or one side, you can easily get sucked into the very charged rhetoric that both sides use to explain today's current issues. I mean, they're very passionate. Obviously, I think politics brings out the best and worst in people, and they will use oftentimes very charged rhetoric in order to really bring their point across. And so you can get sucked into that pretty easily if you're just hearing one side of the story. So I would recommend that you really read broadly, both sides. Even if you don't really think that the other side is telling the truth, at least that you reading that will make you better informed. I think that is really one of the bigger issues today, is that people really refuse to see what the other side has to say because they believe that what they have is right and what they have is wrong. And so if you don't really know what the other side is saying or what the other point is, if you're trying to have a civil political discussion with someone, you're really only going to have your talking points and not theirs. Not that you're reading just so that you can argue, but you're reading to make yourself more informed, so you can have a well-rounded, well-formed opinion. Step 3 is to get as close to the primary source as you can. Oftentimes when you see a news report that seems really kind of charged. For example, this article says that President Trump was calling for people to drink bleach. That sounds crazy, doesn't it? And it is, because it never happened. If you actually listen to the primary source, in this case Donald Trump, his full interview, he doesn't say that at all. Getting the primary source really allows you to sift through opinions and get to facts. Because if you're just listening to someone else say what someone else said, things can get lost in translation. If you've ever played the game telephone, where you start on one end with a saying, it rarely ever gets to the whole line of people to the end the same way that it went in. Same thing goes for news. Especially, like I said earlier, when people are really trying to just sell outrageous things to get you to click on those articles so they can get more money, you really need to get your information at the source. Step 4 is to remember your purpose. Your purpose for this is to stay informed. Their purpose is to sell stories. So make sure that you don't get lost in what you're reading, that you forget why you were reading these articles in the first place. It's to form your own opinion. If they have a link to the study, read the study for yourself. Don't just take their word for it. That way you aren't really deceived. If you build good habits now, it really prevents you from being the type of person that can be easily misled down the road. And in all of these things, you really have to take what they're saying with a grain of salt sometimes because, like I said, their purpose is to sell stories. So if you do all of these steps, you can really avoid a lot of the fake news articles. You can really get more down to the truth, which will help you in the end. So that's how you get reliable information. The news is probably not going to get any more truthful than it is right now. I mean, we can see from the Gallup poll that I mentioned earlier that from the 1970s, which the Gallup poll started, trust in the media has slowly declined and declined and declined and declined. Oftentimes, they come with a sharp decline in election years. One happened in 2004, the next in 2008, 2012, in 2016, and now in 2020. So you have to keep a watchful eye because the news is highly politicized and there really isn't any more political of an event than an election. So that's why it is very important to make sure that you aren't going to be led astray and you know what you're talking about. So there you have it. That's mass media for you. The next video that we will be talking about will be about the Electoral College, the origins of that, why people are talking about it, and why do people want to get rid of it. We'll get into all of that next time. For now, I'm Ben Leach. Have a great day. Thanks again for watching. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel as well as follow me on Instagram and Parler @The Ben Leach Show.